I don't know if you know her, the neuroscientist, Dr. Sarah McKay, on the show. She was amazing. And it was really blew my mind because I always come on and go, well, I feel like I know a lot about PMS now because so many people have come on and spoken about it. And something that she said was, yes, there is so much about the biology and the hormonal side that do affect PMS. But there's also so many other things, like the cultural messages that we're given. And she said in a really interesting stat that in France, 12% of women compared to 90% of women in Iran are affected by PMS. So she's like, wait, is this biological? Is it environmental? Is it cultural? Like there must be other things. So it makes so much sense when you say, well, if your partner kind of shares the problem and can see you and can support you and can use positive language and not dismiss you and validate you, then it would seem to make more of a supportive environment to be able to cope with PMS.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's interesting. I try and think about how we've all grown up around like what are those messages and like how were we treated at school. I mean, I remember getting my period at school and I decided that I was sick and wanted to go home. I remember first getting it and going in and pretending that I was really ill to go home because I was so embarrassed.
Yeah. I mean, if no one's prepared you, or maybe you've had like one lesson on it and it was very brief and, you know, you're an 11-year-old girl who just started her period for the first time, it can be pretty terrifying if you don't have the information that you need. So I'm really not surprised that that was your experience. And I think, you know, my experience wasn't too dissimilar. I have an older sister, so my mum just kind of hushed me into a room with her and she told me what to do, and that was really the only conversation that we had. But I think because I had older sisters, I'd seen them have, you know, hot water bottles, I seen them moan about having painful periods, so I just assumed this is what's coming. Painful periods, sometimes taking time off school, not exercising during that time or not doing PE. I was a really sporty girl, so I found that like really, like I wasn't really sure how to navigate that. Should I not exercise? Should I exercise? My mum didn't really tell me otherwise. And so I would love that the girls coming up behind us, or even my own daughter, if I ever have one, that their experience is completely different and they feel so well equipped about what to do around their cycles, not just the bleeding phase. And when it comes, it's not like complete panic and it's not something that's like shrouded in shame or embarrassment, or you can't speak up if you are the girl who's vomiting because your pain is so severe or you're soaking through your uniform, because a lot of girls do not speak up about that because they're so embarrassed.
That was me. And I think it was really interesting because I know that you try to not talk down about the pill. You have a very balanced view about it. But the solution for me at that time was, we'll just go on the pill because it's so much easier. And then it was great because it stopped my periods. And then I started modeling. So for me, I was like, well, this is brilliant. I haven't got to think about it. And then 10 years later, I had this moment where I was like, wait, I have no idea how my cycle is. And I've had to reframe my own narrative with my menstrual cycle because now I feel very empowered by it and I feel very lucky and very grateful to have it. And one of my friends said something really interesting. She said, you know, I kind of feel sorry for men because we have this amazing moment in a month where we can just allow ourselves to let everything just go and we can cry and we can kind of reset ourselves.
Yeah.
And she was like, and I feel quite sorry for my partner that he doesn't really get that. He doesn't really get that card in the month. And I was like, that's such a positive way
of looking at it, yeah.
To look at it. And it takes me back to a question which I get a lot and I'm sure you get overwhelmed with. But a lot of people will say, well, what does a normal period look like? What is a normal period and how do I know if I'm not? Because some people say, well, I come on every 21 days. And someone else might say, well, I come on every 34 days. So like, how do we define what a normal period is and how can we then be aware if we're maybe not falling into the remits of what that could look like?
Yeah. There's no like real such definition of a healthy menstrual cycle, but there are what I like to call green flags or what fall into that like healthy signs that your cycle's working as it should. And so in terms of how often it's coming, we want something to fall between 21 to 35 days, which is quite a big variation. But textbooks will say like a 28-day cycle is what most women have. But actually, a lot of the research shows that not many women do have a 28-day cycle. So it's okay if you're falling either side of that. Now, another thing that I often find isn't common knowledge is how to track the days of your cycle. So day 1 is the first day of your bleeding, and the last day of your cycle, so say that is 28, will be the last day before your next bleed. So that's your full cycle length. Then in terms of the bleeding phase, which is typically the first 5 to 7 days, bleeding for 3 to 5 days is considered normal. If you're bleeding up to 7 days and it's quite heavy, that's a bit of a red flag. So you'd want to speak to your doctor about that. But heaviness and pain is very subjective. So we can measure how much fluid or blood is too much to lose. But I don't know about you, but not many people are measuring that. So what I think is a better definition is it's too much for you to manage. So if you're soaking through it, not every night, if you're having to wear 2 products all the time, if every hour you're like clock watching and you need to like get in and change. And similar with pain, if you're clock watching because you want to stay on top of painkillers every 4 hours because otherwise the pain's too severe, or you're someone who vomits because of the pain, or what I hear a lot of the girls with endometriosis tell me is lying on the floor because it's really cold and that's the only way to get relief when they're, you know, experiencing painful periods or really heavy periods during the night. So they would be red flags. And then not bleeding between your period. Sometimes it's okay to spot. So sometimes after sex you might spot, sometimes after extreme exercise you might spot. But if it's happening all the time, or you're finding it's happening frequently across your cycle, that's also a red flag. So those would be the main things. And the other thing that I'd add in, which we've already kind of talked about, is any severe mood symptoms in that late luteal phase, so the week or so before your period. Anything that's causing disruption in your everyday life, whether that's work, your relationships, your activity, the things that you love, that's a red flag for me.
And so the one thing you mentioned there, which I think every woman will relate to, and if you don't, I'm incredibly jealous. Painful periods.
Yeah.
So you said something earlier, you know, and very similar. I had an older sister and a mum that would always have hot water bottles around that time and warm baths and, you know, gentle yoga moves. But I always remember being like, oh gosh, and I would be terrified of my period coming because the pain. Is there anything we can do? Just thinking actively around having painful periods. Like obviously there's going to be symptoms of maybe why, like endometriosis, like you just mentioned, and other key drivers. But general period pain, like what advice can you give to people who are listening who suffer?
Yeah, it's really tricky if you fall into that category. And most women will experience some pain. It's unrealistic to have no cramping at all because our body is essentially cramping in order to shed the womb lining. So we have to expect a little bit of discomfort, but severe pain that's interfering with your day-to-day is not normal. If you fall into I get some cramping, but I'm able to carry on with my day-to-day, it's not interfering with like my physical activity or my relationships, then there are a few things that you can do. As much as it feels like an old wives' tale, hot water bottles, heat patches that you can get at the pharmacy, or any heat tool can be effective. And we have some research to back that up. So if you do have a hot water bottle, that's fine, or you can get those heat pads as well, have a warm bath. They're good methods. Certain yoga poses can be helpful.
Some in here,
I've got some in the book.
Hang on, let me find. I've honestly read this back to back. And I remember seeing this and thinking, this is something that I'm definitely going to be doing. Here we go. I'll show it for anyone watching on YouTube. We're going to show you there's different exercises here.
There we go.
How many have we got? 8.
And I've just pulled a few
boat
from...
pose.
Yeah.
That feels like it would cramp my stomach.
Maybe it would, but this is a sequence that I've taken from a research study. So yeah, and they seem to be the same movements that show up in most of the research studies. But again, no 2 women are the same. So if you find that uncomfortable, I wouldn't recommend it. There's a lot of people who say, you know, yogis who will say, I've been told not to do inversions during my period. There's actually no evidence to say that you can't. I think maybe hypothetically, some people are worried it might cause something called retrograde menstruation, which is a theory related to endometriosis, but we've got nothing to say that. If it's not causing you any discomfort, you can absolutely do it. It's not harmful. It's more of a ancient recommendation not to do that. So if that's part of your practice and you don't do it for that reason, then don't do it. But if you've always been doing those inversions during your period and it's fine, then continue to do so. But for people who don't practice yoga, all forms of movement can be beneficial during exercise, during your period, because exercise is anti-inflammatory and it can produce antioxidants. So it's really beneficial for us. I know a lot of people don't feel like doing much during that time, but it doesn't have to be severe. It could be a yoga class. It could be going for a long walk. It could be a lightweight session. It could be a Pilates session, whatever works or feels good for you. But generally, trying to move as opposed to complete rest tends to be more beneficial.